Welcome, everybody, to the first episode of a new podcast entitled The Work in Meditation. My name is Roland, and I'm a novice student of both the work and a novice meditator. I don't claim to be a teacher of the work or meditation, but I have a fascination with both these topics, and I have an equal fascination with this podcast medium as a way to promote ideas. I want to note here that I envision this podcast to be a community participation project where we also have community members come on not only as guests, as Robin has graciously agreed to be today, but also to serve as hosts. I think that this is something that we could co-create together and have it as a very valuable asset for our communities. The idea is that we want to help our friends, co-workers, and co-meditators promote these ideas from their personal experiences, and in the process, we learn more together as a community about these topics. I'm so personally interested in promoting these ideas because both the work and meditation have made such a huge impact in my life to relieve my own personal needless suffering, and I think these effects aren't unique to me. Consequently, I believe the work and meditation can help other people too, and I know Robin and our other guests believe this too. The central goal of this podcast is to promote ideas that contribute to the alleviation of suffering. Our wish in this podcast is that something that we say will connect with our audience members in a way that could help create positive changes in their lives. The theme of this podcast is a statement said to me by the former pastor of Church of Conscious Harmony in Austin, Peter Haas, and what he said was centering prayer does the heavy lifting of the work, and I think you could equally replace centering prayer with meditation. Meditation does the heavy lifting of the work, and this idea, if it doesn't make sense to you now, it's okay. That's what we're going to be talking about here. We're simultaneously introducing this podcast in this first episode because for this first episode, we have as our first guest one of the world's experts on the work, both from an academic perspective, but also because he himself is a deep practitioner of the work, and his name is Dr. Roland Bloor. And I do want to introduce Robin briefly. First, as you'll be able to tell from his accent, Robin was born in Liverpool, England. Robin was educated in the area of computer science at a time when computers were still very new to consumers generally. He eventually earned a PhD in computer science from Wolverhampton University in the United Kingdom. Concerning his exposure to the work in 1988, after drifting through several work groups, Robin met and became a pupil of a woman named Rena Hands. Rena was a one-time associate of J.G. Bennett, a student of Peter Ouspensky's, and later a pupil of George Gurdjieff himself. Following Gurdjieff's death in 1949, she remained part of J.G. Bennett's group. Subsequently, Rena formed groups both in London, where she lived, and in Bradford in the north of England in conjunction with a woman named Madame Knott, who is another work teacher. The interesting and important thing about Robin is that when you listen to him talk, you're listening to someone who is a direct spiritual grandson to Gurdjieff, and consequently, we are all spiritual great-grandchildren to Gurdjieff as we are taught by Robin. I feel extremely blessed and privileged to have Robin here as a guest because of his great knowledge, his great being, and his great lineage. Robin, I need to shut up. Welcome to our new podcast, The Work and Meditation, and thank you for being with us.
Thank you. Thank you for that long introduction.
Well, we're really going to immediately jump into the episode today, talking about what the work is, and whether you're already familiar with the work or like me before 2022 had never heard of G.I. Gurdjieff, Peter Ouspensky, or Maurice Nicoll, J.G. Bennett, or some of the other great teachers of the work. First principles and having a beginner's mind are always a good place to start in any conversation. So, Robin, could you please summarize for us what the work is?
Yeah, so that's, let's say, a big question. You could say, in the general sense, a number of people become interested, or maybe they're even born interested in spiritual pursuits. So, first of all, above and beyond anything else, the work is one spiritual pursuit. that might be compared to, I guess, any kind of religious pursuit, but it's different in the sense that it is a body of knowledge.
And it's intentionally non-sectarian, right?
Yeah, it is without any allegiance to any kind of religious line or thinking. In fact, it has its own philosophy. So you would say that its philosophy, while it might agree in various ways with, let's say, Christianity or Buddhism, it is distinct. So the first thing is it's a way of knowledge. It thinks of itself as a very particular way of knowledge. At various points in time, it is said it's necessary to reintroduce a body of knowledge to the world so that those people who are interested can pick it up and use it to understand the universe and to understand themselves and to pursue spiritual development. So in terms of the work that Gurdjieff introduced, you could say there are 5 pillars. One of the pillars is the movement, sacred dances that he created, that he choreographed, and that he taught, and that many other people have since taught. And you can attend Gurdjieff movement groups. There's one in Austin, for example, but there are many around the US and across the world. He introduced the body of knowledge that you would think of as an objective science. It's a different kind of science. It has a different set of principles than the kind of science that mankind, in one way or another, has arrived at. It is distinctly different because most of objective science is conducted within oneself. You learn the universe as the universe is a reflection of your own inner world. And that's the nature of objective science, is really to describe the outside world. Then there's the objective literature that Gurdjieff produced, particularly his magnum opus, Beelzebub's Tales to His Grandson, but also Meetings with Remarkable Men, and another book entitled Life is Real, Only Don't Worry. So that's the literature of the work. And then there's work groups, and work groups have formed have been formed ever since Gurdjieff began, really. And they involve people working together, but working together in a particular way that is productive for inner development. And finally, the main, let's say the main pillar of the work is work on oneself. And that involves, of course, perhaps all of those other things that I've described. But it particularly involves organizing your life so that it is possible to pursue the practices of the work. And chief among those practices is what's referred to as the preparation, or the meditation at the beginning of the day. And from the point of view of the work and the point of view of the theory of the work, that is the dough of the octave of the day. If you don't do this, then you're not really working on yourself. So it's a necessary practice. And you can compare it to other practices like Zazen meditation. It's not particularly dissimilar, but it's not the same.
So if I would, excuse me, if I would just jump in really quickly, that the meditation relates in my mind so strongly to the idea of the necessity for self-observation in the work.
Yeah, well, it's your problem with self-observation, the problem that anybody has, is they think that they can observe themselves, which in actual fact most people cannot do, and they need to be taught to do it. However, setting that to one side, you have the situation that in normal life there are many things going on at any given point in time that you are actually dealing with, taking in the impressions of the situation you're in, and so on and so forth. And it is very difficult to observe oneself in those circumstances because of the high level of distraction. But at the beginning of the day, when you take some silence to yourself for perhaps 20 or 30 minutes, you get the opportunity to work without those various distractions that happen all the time. And so you have a much better chance of observing what it is that you are.
And the preparation is specifically a body sensing exercise.
Yeah, the preparation. So there's two things here. First of all, the preparation was introduced by Gurdjieff a long time ago. And it involved sitting in a relaxed but upright posture. You could be sitting in the lotus position on the cushion if you wanted to, or just sitting in a chair like I am right now, but the body has to be upright. And then the preparation consists of sensing all the parts of the body piece by piece until the whole of the body appears. So that's how the preparation was taught to me a long time ago. But another form of let's call it meditation was introduced perhaps in the 1990s by Madame de Salzman, who had taken over the Gurdjieff work. And that's really the Zen practice of Zazen, which is again sit in an upright position, but this time focus on perhaps the breath or perhaps a particular aspect, but there is a focus.
Well, I can gladly report this morning I achieved the 300 breaths, and it took me a little longer than 35 minutes, but that was the first time that I had done that, and it was very interesting, some of the things that came up, but I really like that as such a specific way to introduce meditation using very clear, it's not, there's no woo involved in that. It's just pay attention to your breath and pay attention to 300 of them. And that's a very useful practice that we've talked about.
Yeah, in certain schools of Zen, it's regarded as the only practice necessary in respect of meditation. And the focus in that meditation is very specifically on the breath through the nose. It's this part of you that you focus on that. And that focus over a period of time, during any given sitting with this, over a period of time, you gradually expand that focus of the breath. So suddenly you're aware not only of the breath through the nose, but the movement of the diaphragm, and then the penetration of the breath into all parts of your body. And this goes on. And the other act, which is also taking place when you're doing this, is that you need in one way or another to deal with every distraction that comes up, and you deal with it simply by returning to what you were doing before. So you're gradually strengthening a muscle within your brain, if you like, but you're strengthening a muscle that allows you to deal with distractions. And ultimately, eventually, if you manage to continue this for a long time, then this becomes a habit that you can take into life, and you can be more aware in life than you would otherwise have been.
Yeah, I was reading in the commentaries this morning, and the next one was going to be talking about the pendulum swing, but one of our friends gave a talk recently that we all experience pendulum swings in our lives, where today I'm very optimistic about, my business outlooks, but then tomorrow I'm really worried about the taxes I have to pay. And so I go back and forth, but really the goal is to move up the pendulum so that we are less affected by those, what we sense, the outward circumstances of our lives. And I just imagine meditation being able to just broaden that spectrum, where we're staying more and more in the center and not being so driven by circumstances. I think that's a really good way for me to describe it.
Yeah, I think that's accurate enough. I think the thing to understand is we don't know ourselves. Right, so we can be given a lot of information about ourselves, but we don't know whether it's true. And the only way you can find out whether something is true is by looking. You are the person that can find, if I tell you something about the way human beings work internally, you are the person that can find out whether it's true. And you're the only person that matters in respect of that, So this is the first thing, is that we don't really know ourselves. So there are various things that could be affecting us today. Let's say we're doing the meditation today. It may be that the planets are affecting you. It may be that because of the time in which you were born and because of the influence of the planets on humanity in general, in fact, nature in general, that it's a bad day for you. And there's nothing you can do about it. You are that individual who was born at that particular time that responds to those influences in the way that you do. You're having a bad day. Your best friend is having a great day because he got a different influence on it, and so on. So, we don't know that. We don't know. There are other things that are subconscious that people know about psychologically, in the sense that people talk about individuals being deeply affected by some trauma very early in their life. Well, it may be that this morning something inadvertently stimulated a memory of that trauma, and that trauma has entered into your meditation. And of course, it has a big impact. Whereas most of the events of your life, if you even think about them when you're meditating, do not have a big impact. So that can be that. And this is different for everybody, different people, different, let's say, strong impressions in their life, shocks that occurred to them. Different people have different shocks. So this could be one of the reasons why today the meditation wasn't good. Or alternatively, you can have a day where the meditation is wonderful. And even though you are at the moment involved in a legal case about your taxes and your relationship with your significant other is breaking down, and so on and so forth, it doesn't matter. You just calm through the meditation, which is how it should be.
Yeah, I think one of the most powerful ideas from the work for me is the idea that we have a right not to be negative. And so as a novice, what I've done a lot is trying to observe negative emotions. And I really see a relationship between my meditation practice, my ability to create space in terms of how I, when I do observe myself, there's an important or an important additional factor to that self-observation. It's non-criticality. So if I observe the negative emotion in myself, I don't condemn myself for, well, oh, you're just a negative person. How, it's hopeless. I can just say that's just one identity, and just that aspect of the self-observation and the non-criticality. I know my meditation practice has helped that tremendously. That those two first essential steps with the work.
So there are a number of things that arise from the thing that you've raised. The first thing is that it's normally our habit to make judgments. And one of the things that you learn in the work is that you don't judge. Because you don't know mostly. You see someone behaving in a particular way at some particular point in time, but you don't know why they were behaving in that way. You're thinking that you do, you almost certainly don't. You don't know what their nature particularly is. You don't even know your own nature, so how would you know theirs? But we have a tendency to make judgments, and those judgments normally are not particularly useful. And naturally, we make judgments on ourselves when we notice certain things about ourselves, and those judgments are not particularly useful either. So the thing that we're taught in the work is not to judge, but to measure. If somebody, let's say, for instance, appears to be genuinely traumatized, we can measure the fact that they're traumatized. And we can measure the extent to which they're traumatized, but we don't necessarily jump to any conclusions about that. We just store the information, and we don't attach to it either. We don't start making assumptions about the individual because of that. We just know that we've observed this particular thing happen with that individual on this particular day. So that's part of the situation with judgment. But negative emotion is very specific. And we have to deal with negative emotion really quite specifically in a number of ways. One of the things that's important is to understand that the emotions are very fast. And because emotions are very fast, while they come and they might have a big impact, you may feel very negative about something. If you wait, it'll go. So you're not, you get attached, but if you wait and if you break the attachment, it'll go. The emotions are fast; they don't last very long.
Yeah, so waiting, that's what we practice in meditation. Just a moment where you give yourself can allow yourself to experience that negative emotion, but then just as you say, unless you grab hold of it, it'll just pass.
Normally discover, if it doesn't pass, it means that you're holding it down and you like it. Even though it might not seem that way, it is the case. If it doesn't pass, it's because you're attached to it and you want it to be there. Most negative emotions start off with the idea of how important I am. So you hear somebody say something negative about yourself and you're immediately angry at them because you're such an important person. How could they say something that negative about you? Well, you're not important.
So maybe I could just jump in there. At that point, I've identified with my anger.
Yeah, that's right.
And I'm justified in my anger, right? Because I read somewhere that Ouspensky talked about our observations being incomplete unless we specifically can get in touch with how we justify that identification. So of course, somebody offends me. Well, it's offensive. It's so I have a right to be offended and be identified with my anger, and I just to gain peace in my life, I have to let go of that idea. I have to let go of the idea that I can be identified with any of these fleeting identities, the thoughts that I have, that if I'm identified with any of those, I've really just and we're always all identified constantly, but the more that we can see that and make a conscious intention to let go of some of these identifications, then you can say anything about me, and maybe I do get angry at it, but I can quickly just allow that anger to pass and say, well, no, that's fine. I don't identify with that anger, and that's a very powerful concept for me as well.
Yeah, I prefer the word attachment in the following way, that when you're meditating and something comes up, you're supposed to be just sitting here being aware of the breath, following the breath from its beginning to its end, and then accepting the next breath and counting them as they go, so that 300 breaths is regarded as the length of the sitting, no matter how fast you breathe. And something comes up, and if you watch it in meditation, it's very interesting to see why you're taking any notice of it. There are many things happening to you at any particular point in time. You know, your heart is beating, your body is digesting food almost all the time. Various tensions have arisen in various parts of your body. Just within the body itself, all sorts of things are going on. Your ears are hearing everything that's happening. Your eyes, if they're open, are seeing everything that's happening. And so on. You know, the touch of your clothes on your body. There's a vast number of things that are happening at any particular point in time that you don't pay attention to. You may, if you thought about them, notice that they're happening, but you don't pay any attention to, you don't attach to them. And all the things that come up in meditation should be treated exactly the same, whether it's your memory of some kind of wrong that somebody did to you a long time ago. You know, it's just ignore it, let it go. It has no importance.
Well, there's an alternative that we can really grasp hold of, you know, all these things that come and go, but then there's this idea in the work of self-remembering as well.
Yeah, self-remembering is a particular state. So when we're talking about the meditation, we're talking about the fact that within any, let's say, 30-minute meditation, you will go through various states. And self-remembering is just a word that's used to describe a high state. And the nature of that state is best understood by experiencing it. I mean, you can describe it. It's self-remembering because you are aware of yourself and the world at the same time. And the world might be your inner world or the outer world, but you're aware of both of these things at the same time. In that situation, you have the power of choice.
I remember reading somewhere that self-remembering is should be new almost every time that you do it, you know, and don't allow it to become stale. When I first learned about the work, I thought of self-remembering as being a love child of God. But I think now the way that I really think about it is that in each of us, there's an element of the divine. And the more and more we can get in touch with that and let go of the attachments that we have to these identities and negative emotions, but the more and more we're unified with that divine that's inside of us, that's really what self-remembering is remembering that, you know, this is we're mortal. You know, we live in these flesh suits that house our, you know, whatever we think of as our identities. But at some point, you know, the flesh suit that I wear will disappear and you know, become dust. And so what happens after that? You know, where does my identity reside? Really having that identity in the divine. It seems like, for me recently, as I've been thinking about self-remembering, that's where I've really grasped hold of that idea.
Well, I mean, the first thing to say, you know, which refers to the very start of what you said, self-remembering getting stale. It isn't self-remembering if there's any feeling of staleness about it. So it never does get stale. What actually does happen at various points in time is you have imagination that you're doing things that you're not doing. And this is typical of human beings. In one way or another, they imagine themselves capable of things that they aren't really capable of at all. And therefore, they live in some kind of imaginary self that is imagining that it's doing things that it just isn't doing. And this is typical of the spiritual pursuit. There's something that believes that it is doing spiritual work, that is just an imitator, and can't and won't and never will do any kind of spiritual work. And that's a stage of the work that you see. Eventually it becomes clear to you what's real and what is not in that area.
And we're all subject to this. I don't think that we ever really escape from this idea, but it is very powerful, and specifically with respect to the power of imagination, and to think that I'm a unified whole, that the idea of multiplicity of eyes is something that's very fascinating to me as well, and I think one of the biggest things that people have to overcome when they're learning about the work is their imagination about their identities. That I imagine that I'm a unified I. There's one Roland Wiederaenders, and he has all these characteristics, but the fact that I show up one day and I'm really enthusiastic, and I show up the next day and I'm really depressed. I think we all can really relate to those different moods, maybe, but to think that I'm a unified I mean, that's a supreme exercise of my imagination. Would you say that that's right?
Yeah, I mean, this is an idea that's in one way or another kind of difficult to clarify to yourself. The fundamental the fundamental illusion behind all of this is that man is capable of doing. And the idea of doing, understand it very simply in terms of, let's say somebody teaches you carpentry, and after a period of lessons, you're capable of doing carpentry, and you actually start to do it. That's doing. But when we're speaking in the spiritual realm or the psychological realm, the idea of doing something means that you have knowledge and you're putting it into practice. And that is psychological knowledge you're putting into practice. And this is something that man cannot do and has to learn in order to be able to do. His psychology is completely along the lines of it happens. So there are various external events that occur to people, some small, some large, some fleeting, some lasting a long time, and so on and so forth. But in all of those events, for the normal person, it all just happens. And they're taking in the impressions of the situation second by second, split second by split second. And they're just responding automatically to them. And in one way or another, they may have the imagination that they're doing something, but they're not doing anything at all. They're just responding to the outside world. So that's the many eyes, are the many different responses you have to the many different impressions that you can receive, or the shocks that you receive. Those are the many eyes.
And the ability to observe those is really important. And that ability to observe is again, bringing this all back to meditation. Your capacity for observation is expanded with the meditation practice.
Yeah, I mean, that's you're using this time that you take for yourself to learn how to observe the many different reactions that you have to the world, so that you can at some point in time turn them into actual decisions made by yourself and implemented. And that's a slow process, because there are many different things that we've learned over the years. The older they are, the more we have. So that's the one of the purposes of this kind of meditation. Let me just touch on the idea of the the particle of the of God, if you like, or particle of the absolute. It's a theory within the work, and everything in the work is actually presented as a theory for you to try and verify or disprove. And it's a theory in one way or another that there is fundamentally a particle of the absolute in you. And that what we're attempting to do in one way or another is to rise to that particular level within ourselves, or to rise towards it so that the higher level can act through us. And in this way, it's probably better not to think of yourself as important at all, because that particle of God is higher than you.
Yeah, the more we're unified with the particle of the absolute inside of us, it just requires a diminishment of all these eyes. The personality doesn't survive death. But what does is the part of me that can unify with that bit of the absolute inside me.
Yeah, you in one way or another, you're exploring your inner self, and there's a part of you that is capable of connecting to the higher, and that's really what you're trying to find. But the higher, we can think of the absolute, we can think of God in terms of the universe if we like. But if there's a particle of God inside of us, that's going to be the easiest way for us to connect or get close to the higher, because it's with us right now.
Well, and that's the beautiful thing about the work, and I think some conservative Christians would look with real skepticism on anything that where you say, well, there are all paths that lead up the same mountain, but I think we have to acknowledge that we all grow up in particular cultures, and we all conceive of the divine in different ways. And I don't want to be so arrogant as to suppose to think, to impose my view of the divine on you, but we can have this common language where we're describing that, what a beautiful idea that if we can look at everybody around us and tell ourselves that they have a shard of the divine, a shard of the absolute in them, just like I do, then I think that we can look on others with much more compassion and love. Consciousness is a part of this as well. But I think that's the beautiful thing about the work, is giving us a common language to talk with other people about what we believe at a very deep level, without getting into making distinctions about the specifics that maybe in the end would only divide us.
So one of the things about the work is that it doesn't involve belief. So when people come from a position that, let's say, they are committed Christians or committed Buddhists or committed Hindus or whatever, and they start insisting that something is a particular way, from our perspective, all that we're watching is identification, which is a very low manifestation. And if they think in one way or another that their identification is in some way related to the absolute, we would say it can't be. We've seen it in ourselves, and we know that it can't be. So it isn't necessary for us to give any credence whatsoever to anybody's particular set of beliefs, but we don't want to oppose them either, because they've developed to whatever they've become in their own peculiar way, and they perhaps will eventually get to a point where they no longer need to identify with various strongly held ideas, and then their possibilities will increase.
Well, knowing too, I guess maybe this brings up the ray of creation a little bit, but that the idea is that we've been given our tools to become self-developing organisms. That's really we are moving up the scale up the ray of creation, or ideally, to become more and more unified with the divine, the absolute. And I lost my train of thought there, but that's another aspect to this that I think is really useful, is to think that there is an absolute, and it's represented in different ways in our minds, but the distinctions aren't as important as when the distinction becomes important is when we have an attachment to a specific idea. And it's such a the idea of the divine, the absolute, it's so if anybody says that they have understanding of what God is, that they don't understand the nature of how beyond our understanding the divine really is. And so I see it as such an arrogance to think that I could ever have such a strong attachment to my concept of the divine. If you don't believe in Jesus, you're going to hell. Well, that's not for me to say, but that really would be me being so strongly attached to my concept of the divine that I can't see the divine in other people, regardless of what it is, their conception of the divine. And I think that's essential. It's essential for me to have genuine compassion on other people, to let go of my attachments when I'm trying to interact with another person.
Yeah, the work presents a series of ideas, some of which you could say were complex, in the sense that you're not going to understand them just by reading through them in 5 minutes. The importance of those ideas, really above and beyond anything else, is that they are a structure which helps you to ask questions. And the nature of the work is to ask questions. And the questions that one asks, some of them last for a long, long time, for years and years. The work considers a question to be a kind of prayer. It's a desire in some way or other to understand the higher, all the questions. And there are lots of interesting questions that the work raises up that I don't think I ever encountered anywhere else, So one of the questions, for example, is, does God suffer? You're not going to answer that question that easily. One of the questions is, what is the highest level that man can achieve? Does it actually connect with God? It's a question. And the only way really to answer questions like this, or to attempt at questions like this, is to walk around them and think about what they mean. One of the questions of the work is, what am I? One of the questions is, what do I know for sure? One of the questions is, one of the deep questions of the work is why, but it's why in respect of anything that happened. Why? Yesterday, somebody died in a motor accident. Why? How did that happen? And so on, And by making questions, you actually open up the many of the mysteries of life, and the beauty of life is only really response to questions, because it starts to become apparent. You just look at something, and it's you can go into the backyard and see the next door neighbour's cat, and it's, what exactly is that? What is that living thing over there? What is it? Or you look at a tree and you say, how did that happen? Because we really don't know the answers to any of these questions. We can certainly, if you like, read things in textbooks that seek to explain such things, but they never do explain such things. They just they sell you a story. That's all they do.
And this really comes back to the idea of meditation. And I read the other day a summary about a meditation, a study about meditation, breaking down our predictive processes. So we all have, these attachments, but the more we engage in meditation, the predictive processes are broken down in our minds, and so we're able to look at that cat going through the the backyard, and instead of hating it that it's invading my property, just seeing it as this amazing creation. Not people are dog people, people are cat people, but every moment around us, if we pay attention, the miraculous is made evident. I think that's the fundamental message of what you're saying. And again, coming back to meditation, the more and more we meditate, the more and more our capacity to observe and the capacity to observe reveals the reality of everything. And it's just like what you're saying, asking the right questions and letting go of attachments allows us to really gain better perspective and being more in touch with reality. That's what I want. I don't want to live in the illusions that I create, that limited by my senses.
There's this story in the Gospels of Christ healing the blind man. And he rubs spittle on the blind man's eyes, and the first thing that happens with the blind man is that he sees things, but he doesn't see them as they are. But he hadn't seen anything, and now he sees things. And then Christ acts again, and this time he sees reality as it is. And this is the process. From the perspective of the work, this is the process of the work. You start off and you don't know anything. And you really don't. You might think you do, but you don't. So you're completely blind. And eventually certain things are given to you and certain events occur. And you see the world, at least you can see that there is such a world. But you're still a long way away from seeing reality as it is. And meditation is part of that. It's one of the roads to reality, meditation.
Well, Robin, that we had talked ahead of time about wanting to be sensitive to our audience, and we're about 47 minutes into this now. It seems like ending on the words of a great spiritual teacher, somebody that I would say he's my God, Jesus. But leaving on those words, I think everybody recognizes that it's a wonderful illustration of this idea from the work, that what we're really trying to do is see things clearly, see reality clearly, look past all the illusions and attachments that we have, and in the end, join ourselves with the divine, however we might conceive of that. Robin, just any parting thoughts that you have, and anything that we left out here. It's like you said at the beginning, we could talk. I really do feel like we could talk for hours and hours, and maybe we can do this again to further the conversation. But just with respect to everything that we've talked about today, is there anything that you would want to leave, thoughts that you would want to leave us with?
Well, I can give you one thought that was a piece of advice given to me by my teacher, Wiederaenders. She said this: the work brings results, but you actually have to do it.
Well, I think that's a great place to stop, and we can really encourage everybody to do it. If you want to do something specific, take up a meditation practice. 5 minutes a day. The consistency is what's so important about it, but it will yield these results that Robin is talking about. Well, Robin, thank you so much for being a guest on this inaugural episode, and maybe we'll talk more offline. Maybe we follow up immediately. That would be my wish. I think just doing another conversation like this, just picking up where we left off. But by the end of this episode, we hope that you've learned more about the work in meditation, and I hope that we've conveyed to the audience about what an expert Robin is regarding the work. Not only, again, is this isn't just a topic of academic study, but it's a philosophy, a philosophy that you can apply to your own life. And I think it's wonderful that Robin has not only engaged with the work, but also with meditation, and is helping us to understand how meditation can be an essential aid to both him and other individuals seeking to apply the principles of the work to their lives. So Robin, tell our audience how they can get in touch with you.
Well, I run a website, tofathomthegist.com, and you can go and visit that website, and if you want to contact me, just contact me. Or else email me. My email address is robin.bloor@gmail.com. Just say, you said I could email you. Just begin your email like that, and I'll try and respond to anything you send.
And we'll make sure we get all your contact information in the show notes for sure. So, well, okay, everyone, thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed watching this video, please hit the like button and subscribe to our channel, The Work and Meditation.